that ships can come in and out of the port. So that's the first thing. There is the development of the port. This is a public-private partnership. So we have North Point that has come in to say that they will develop the port. They're expected to put in $2 billion. There are rail upgrades. That will be a few billion. Eventually, we would like to see these containers go all the way through to the Midwest. Again, getting a lot of diesel trucks off the road, allowing us to ship our goods both into and out of this port would be great. So it's going to take time and a lot of money, but this is the first major port that has been built on the West Coast since the 1960s. When we look at what Canada's doing in Prince Rupert Sound, just north of us, they've just put $3 billion into their port. In Mexico, they're in Central America, they are investing in their ports. Supply chain infrastructure does cost money, and it's investments that benefit us for not just now, but for future generations. So I know that I didn't give you a specific number, but it really depends on what part of the project you're talking about.
Thank you.
And to speak on this $100 million, can you just speak to what aspect of the project this $100 million is supposed to be allocated toward?
I believe it's towards the dredging.
Towards the channel modification.
Towards the channel modification.
Are there still, certain environmental impact studies and things that need to happen before that dredging can commence?
Absolutely. And so the first thing that needs to happen, and we're moving towards, is a full NEPA process. Mm-hmm. So that will happen before anything, one shovel goes into the ground, and they're moving forward with that presently. Okay. And from my perspective, and I know Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden are also fully in support, we do not want shortcuts taken in our environmental impact studies at all whatsoever. We want to make sure that we have tribal engagement and have them at the table during the planning, not just after we're done, please will you check this box. I think we saw that with BOEM, and people felt like they were rolled over. And so the port has really worked on community outreach and making sure that they're being transparent in how they're conducting business. And we have been abundantly clear that we do not want shortcuts taken in terms of how the preparation before this project moves forward.
The $100 million grant for the dredging, and then the for the bonding, and then the two $33 million grants and the $25 million that's on the way, those aren't connected in any way, correct? They're all separate?
They are separate. So it's, what we have was the $100 million in bonding, which will go towards channel modification. That's from the state, and that's part of our bonding authority. And it specifically says this is only if the federal government also comes in, which is very common in a project of this nature, right? So that's the bonding. Secondly, we've got it was a $29 million grant from the federal government and a $4 million grant, which just came through the door, and Melissa can tell us more about what those are. And then we have another $25 million that we expect to come through shortly. That $25 million is specifically for planning.
Absolutely.
What did you talk about there?
Nate, I appreciate your question about the planning and the environmental permitting. Part of it is this whole project is connected, so we can't start the environmental studies until we have enough design for the entire project, because it has to be considered as one. The grants that the Congresswoman just mentioned that just came through, one is for planning the railroad upgrades, and the other one is for planning the rail crossing elimination in Reedsport. The one that we're still waiting on, which should be in any day, is for planning the terminal. And once design and permitting is far enough along, we'll be able to start NEPA, which we're planning on starting in the first quarter of 2026.
Excellent. And if I could ask you one more question.
Oh, sure.
And that's just among local detractors for the project, I'd say the number one buzzword has been transparency. Can you speak to just your plans for transparency when those sort of surveys start to happen?
Absolutely. Right. I think we've already engaged in a level of transparency that we've been trying to make sure that everybody has as much information as possible. We have engaged a community engagement firm that specializes in making sure that the community is aware of all aspects of the project. We've also been going out and attending any community meeting that we're invited to, speaking to different groups, explaining what's going on. I think there's always some level of frustration because you have a project, but until you really go through design and permitting, you can't give people those details that they really want. NEPA will answer a lot of questions that people have, which are really important, and as the Congresswoman mentioned, we are fully committed to a complete and open NEPA process. The other condition that's on the $100 million from the state is that we complete the NEPA process.
So I will say what Melissa didn't say, which is I think that that was a fair criticism of how the port had operated in the past. I do know and I have seen that the new leadership at the port, Melissa sort of being the point person on PSIP and Linnell as executive director, that they have made it abundantly clear to everyone at the port that this is a public body, that these are public records, that people deserve to have information, because if they don't have information, then how can they make up their minds whether this is a good or a bad project? Look, there are people that no matter what happens are gonna oppose this project, right? For various reasons. They don't want industry here, and I don't fault for them for that. That's a fair position to have. However, the people in this community deserve to have information, but you can't have information before you got the plans. So, but the commitment from port leadership, I have been really, really impressed, because it feels almost like night and day. To have this kind of commitment to transparency, and I think that's what the public deserves. Might not have been a politically correct thing to say.